Welcome one and all to Last Stop Penn Station podcast featuring Cary Silkin and Ian Riccoboni. They dive deep into Cary's wealth of stories, and no subject is off limits. From the world of wrestling to his ticket agency, growing up in New Jersey, drug-fueled underground days, hustling in the French Quarter of New Orleans, and endless days and nights in New York City, every story is worth telling.
Well, welcome everyone to Last Stop Penn Station. Cary, last time we were talking about the wrestler. What an exciting journey that was.
That was a lot of fun.
It sure was.
Brought back a lot of memories. And it's funny when we do these things, and we're going to continue doing these, we don't do a lot of preparation, and it's okay. There's other guys that have podcasts with intense detail, which is fine, but I like the way we do them. But I also like the way, by doing it this way, it rattles my brain for these oddball things that I wouldn't have thought of. And we went over a lot of that, when we were talking about the wrestler movie, and I was thinking about it all week, and I was talking to some of my other friends about it. And we touched on, I was really thinking about Marissa Tomei.
Yeah.
And I wonder what the hell they paid her. And, she wanted nothing to do with it, but that was last week. Listen to our prior episode for more exciting details on the lovely Marissa Tomei, who's on Broadway right now.
Oh, really? What show is she on?
I have no idea, but she's on Broadway. If it was hot, I would have bought a few tickets, but
not like Hadestown. Hadestown's still burning down the box office.
Yes, and it is, and maybe I'm missing the boat on Marissa Tomei, but. Anyway, what do we got today, Ian?
Well, today we're going to talk about Ring of Honor heading to Japan for the first time. In 2007, Ring of Honor went to the land of the rising sun. And of course, there was bits and pieces along the way. It was kind of like Ring of Honor was storing water like a camel by bringing in this great Japanese talent over the years and then finally cashing in 2007. Oh,
you had no idea that was on my mind.
No.
The podcast is called Last Stop Penn Station, and I'm going to dispense some of these stories from my past, my ticket hustling, my prior life leading up to Ring of Honor, and all these characters. We meet so many characters in the pro wrestling business. There's just so many characters, and being a character is becoming a lost art. And where I'm going with this is, if you're staring at a phone, the predominant part of your life, and not having a conversation, whether it's on the street, whether you're in a car, whatever it is, at a restaurant, how do you develop any personality? Thus, you get characters. And I'm not talking about pro wrestling characters. I'm talking about that. And I'm also talking about characters in life. And I'm fearing, as time goes on, and it's my generation is falling into this trap too, that there's going to be no more great characters left. I don't know if you've noticed that. You're a young man.
We're becoming homogenized. We really are, because I think one of the consequences of being so connected is that we all start to speak the same language, which is a blessing, but it's also a bit of a curse. All of our norms become the same, or at least start to conform. And I agree. I think we've started down a path where we're losing, like, the great wrestling territories that had their unique qualities. Like Stampede had the great wrestlers, some of the first Oregon wrestlers from Japan and England. And then you'd go to the Midwest and you'd have some of the great amateur wrestlers in the AWA. National wrestling kind of homogenized wrestling. I think being so connected with Twitter and social media might be doing the same for our personalities.
Right. And the wrestlers of the territory era And I don't know if you're aware of this. You probably are. There was recently just ended a 28-day tour of Canada. I know our buddy Jimmy Jacobs was on it.
Yeah, I'd heard about that.
And, they were traveling like the old days, city to city, in the car. They were probably in the car this time staring at their phones. They may not have had good internet in Moose Jaw. So they would not be able to stare at the phones. But that's when you've met so many legends.
Absolutely.
And I've had the privilege to meet so many legends. And what do you always hear? Whether it's learning how to work as a wrestler, honing your interviewing skills, it was all learned in the car from traveling and talking and listening. And when I was in Puerto Rico, which we're going to get to, when we did me and my cousin Mike G, we did the Lucha Libre, whopping 4 issues. That's going to be a good couple of podcasts. Getting threatened by Victor Jovica.
Oh my goodness!
The man who's indicted. I'm not saying he was indicted for killing Bruiser Brody, and having Victor Jovica say, "I told you Jews not to."
Oh my goodness!
Yeah.
Wow.
So that's but I got to know from in Puerto Rico, you had the 2 companies. You had the old World Wrestling Council, which was Jovica and Carlos Colon, and you had Victor God rest his soul, Victor Quinones had the he's the godson of Gorilla Monsoon.
Right. Well, according to the New York Times, he's the son of Gorilla Monsoon.
That's interesting.
That's a different story. Yeah.
So the IWA, their bookers were Dutch Mantel, and I got to know Dutch. And then Bushwhacker Luke came in. That's how I got to be really good friends with Luke. But anyway, I'm taking a circuitous route here. So after Dutch got to know me a little, and I'd be asking him, man, you were in Memphis, with Jerry Lawler and Andy Kaufman. And I'd love to hear these stories. And, I had a good, he was in Puerto Rico when they killed Bruiser Brody.
Oh my goodness.
He'd been in all these territories, Florida in the 70s. This is like 2000, when I was talking to him, and he'd been around, and, NWA, obviously,
right.
The Atlanta, WCW.
He had been at WWF by that point as a manager.
That's right. Uncle Zeb.
Yeah, Uncle Zeb. Yeah.
So when I got to know him, but what the thing I liked about Dutch, and this is another thing that's missing in society these days. We're never going to talk about Japan today.
We'll get there. Hey, we'll get there.
I'll tell you, I'm going to give everybody a clue to if someone really, this is my feeling. If someone cares about you or is interested, let's put it that way, is interested in you. Like if you meet a certain celebrity, I've been fortunate to become friends with some of these guys, like, because of my long chasing Jethro Tull around, like this current crew that's with them. They're not far from the originals except for Ian, but, I've gotten to know them. Point being is like some of the guys are really nice. So when I see them, it's not like, hey, how you doing? And they know me. And like some of them will be like, well, how are you? Like, what's going on with you? And other guys, they don't give a rat's ass. So with Dutch, Dutch would say, like he would like to listen and ask, how you doing there, Cary? And when I started telling him my stories of hustling tickets and working the streets and being at Madison Square Garden and in Penn Station with these characters, and when he started hearing names like Pigface Stanley and his son, little Scotty the Baboon, and started hearing about Blockhead and Blockhead and Silent Sydney, and Freddie the Weeper and the Camel. There was a guy, the Camel. If I'm going to talk about him for a little while, Dutch eventually, I'd be in the car with him. He didn't used to like to drive with the other guys, if possible. So I would drive with Dutch and we'd be going to a show. We weren't always there, but on the weekends we'd be there. And, Dutch, I'm just going to remind you something. If you haven't heard this, every show we'd go to, about 2 miles before the show, he knew we'd go to Humacao and Dutch would know, there's a McDonald's like about 2 miles out. He'd go, hey, Cary, go to that McDonald's there. I just want to get a coffee. And I'm like, yeah, sure. And every time Dutch would say, hey, Cary, I only got a 20. It was like $1.25. But Dutch would say on these rides, he'd say, I'd be asking him, oh man, with Andy Kaufman, and I'm trying to get into these minute details. This is the second time he came, and the third, and how did he's like, let me hear more about that Camel. So the Camel, when I was hustling tickets at Penn Station, at the Garden, and I'd referenced earlier that, Penn Station was the meeting place. There didn't have to be an event. You would just gather. It was like checking into work downstairs. That flight, you probably even familiar with that elevator flight on 32nd Street. Mm-hmm. If it's still there like that, I think it is. And there were different crews of guys. There were like the old timers. There were these certain kids that, younger crew from Long Island. There were these, black hustlers that would come in from the Bronx. There were some old school, black guys. They were just old school, and there was an influx, but there were very few loners. Mm-hmm. Because you sort of, if you went out on the street on your own, there were certain guys that were like shakedown artists. Oh. There was very little, the scalpers, there was never a lot of fighting. There was a lot of threatening. Mm-hmm. And there was a few bad guys that if you were out on the street suddenly at a Ranger game and you didn't belong, because you hadn't paid, like paying your dues, mm-hmm. They would chase you, by intimidate, they'd intimidate, get off the corner, mm-hmm. this kind of stuff. And unless you stood up to them or you had some backup, like I had Freddie the Weeper, was because I wasn't equipped to, take on some of these guys. There were very few loners. I mean, some guys worked by themselves, but they'd been around a long time. It makes me think of a guy like Ronnie the Pole. He would just come in for like a Ranger game or a Giant game. There was Ernie the Hat. He was a specialist in Lincoln. He used to like to go to the opera.
Really?
Lincoln Center.
Wow.
So these guys, and then there was another guy. He's still around. And I have some video of an interview I did with the great Ragamuffin.
I remember Times Square, the video you did. Yeah.
Ragamuffin was another guy. There were guys that didn't want to be bothered. Well, one such guy. So I'm there at there was a period of time where I was there at virtually every event.
And this is 86, 87?
Yes, 87, 88, 89. I was at most events at the Garden. If I wasn't out on an all-night binge of something of that nature, I would check into work, whether it was a basketball game, a concert, tennis, it didn't matter. Or if there wasn't a Garden event, we'd go to Radio City or down to the Palladium mm-hmm. or the Beacon and or Nassau or the Meadowlands, wherever we had to go. So I would still go to wrestling was big. It was a big ticket back then. We're talking about, the Piper Hogan era, right? Post MTV era, but it was big and it would sell out every month. And there was money to be made with tickets, and I used to love to go, of course.
Yeah.
So I noticed this guy over the months. There was this strange man that was lurking around, and I would always, and it's like after a while, you just, you got to pay attention because I would know which guys, to sort of stay away from that would like bother me a little. I would know which guys, would help me, like Phony Pops.
Oh.
We'll get to him. Yeah. I would know which guy, you had to know who the undercover cops were too. They would send out the same undercover cops. So and so you had to know. So I would eventually, I saw this one guy at the wrestling a few times, and he was like selling tickets, but really like quietly and really, almost like I'm like, what's he doing? And the other strange thing when I saw this man, and it didn't dawn on me till like the third or fourth month, was the guy would hold a small handkerchief like that, my dad used to have like in his back pocket.
Yeah.
My father used to get so pissed off if I would sneeze, right? Like, I just sneeze like, Jesus Christ, I have a goddamn handkerchief, right? Do you have a handkerchief?
No, meanwhile, no one in 2019 or 2020
but
is
you
carrying a
know
handkerchief.
that.
Yeah.
So this guy who, I don't ever think I found out his real name.
Really?
I think he was some kind of Arab descent, I believe. Maybe.
Yeah. I mean, this is crazy. This is a whole nother world. I mean, and I'm sure you were calling him this, and I'm sure everybody was. This is how much of a different world it was then.
Well, when I don't know how the first approach came, but there was a big wrestling event, and it was at the Garden. It wasn't like a pay-per-view, but it was like a Monday night. It was sold out, and I saw him going back and forth to the window, and he had another guy. Once in a while, he had another guy with him. Turns out I found out what the guy's nickname was Buff.
Buff. Do we know it? Wow. Okay.
Because when I got to know the Camel a little, and this guy was rolling once in a while, Camel would speak, I guess, Arabic. Or maybe he was Syrian. Maybe it wasn't Hebrew. I would have recognized that, but some kind of Middle Eastern dialect. And this guy would go, okay, move. And he would
send off his assistant?
Yeah, he would send.
Wow.
So we named, once we got to know the Camel, we named the other guy. Move. It's like BOUFF. Soft E.
Silent E. So this is blowing my mind because obviously now this is, the implications of the name and this, and back then though, I'm sure there was all kinds of crazy nicknames, and you've already mentioned a few of them.
Well, sure. And so the Camel, at one of these events, I just walked up to him. I said, "Are you selling tickets? Or you got tickets? Or you need tickets?" And he's like, He had the handkerchief, and it's like, as I asked him, he starts backing up and he goes, "Oh, I have a few to sell. Will you help me?" I'm like, "What do you want for them?" They were like $15 tickets. He goes, "The 30 each." And I'm like, "No, man, I'm hustling, and he didn't distinguish the fact that I was a hustler, or he knew I was a hustler, but he was asking too much. Anyway, I got to know the Camel, and he would only come and buy and sell wrestling tickets.
Really?
We wouldn't see him. I mean, Elton John would be there for 3 nights. Metallica would be there.
And they were getting huge.
Huge.
Yeah, they were getting huge.
Right?
Yeah.
Camel would only come.
Only for wrestling.
And sometimes they weren't that. Sometimes they were good. In the summer, it's sort of the business went down a little.
And even that one summer, they were in the Meadowlands and in Long Island because.
Well, we're going to get to that.
Okay. Because the garden was under repair.
So eventually I got to know him, but I didn't really know him well. So I would see him. We might have had a half-assed conversation. He always had, the other reason, the way he got the real Camel moniker was because when he would the only time he would remove the handkerchief, he had like a slight split in his front teeth, and he would spit a straight line of spit, like a camel style. Right? Wow. And so that's when the handkerchief would come down.
Oh my goodness.
Right?
You would think he might.
Well, I was hanging out with this other guy. I mean, I was hanging out with a lot of guys, but Freddie the Weeper, and there was this other guy, Baby Dumplings.
This is the first time I've known you for quite a few years now. This is the first time I've ever heard of Baby Dumplings.
His name is Charlie, but he went under the name of Baby Dumplings, and he was like, he drank himself to the street. He was a nice guy. I got a lot of, actually Baby Dumplings plays into it because he gave not only did he helped to name the Camel, but he also was able to give the Camel, the Camel was one of the only scalpers that had his own theme song.
Themes, yeah.
Although he didn't know it.
Oh, yeah.
So, I got to know the Camel a little, and you couldn't make any money with him, and he would hide and duck. He was terrified. These kids would come from the Bronx, and this is like in the 80s, and it was rough.
Mhm.
And sometimes, and these young kids would come and
This is the area of the guardian angels too, where there was people thinking they had to
and
take
that was
their
also
own.
the area of the wilding. Do you know what I'm talking about? There was the famous Central Park incident,
Mhm.
and these kids might have been innocent. So it was a strange era. But so the Camel was very wary, right?
Yeah.
So anyway, one day, right when you mentioned a couple of weeks before they had the WrestleMania 1 at the Garden,
Right.
which I attended.
Oh wow, I didn't.
That's
know that,
a beautiful story in itself.
Yeah.
We'll save that to a whole podcast. And so
Yeah.
me and my friend Cosmo, Harry, we made it into that show. All we had between us was we had, I think, like $26, but we were able to procure a ticket and get a ticket, but both of us got into the show because back then you could spin the gate. That's another.
Oh, wow. Yeah. We'll have to talk about that at some other point. Yeah.
So the Camel comes up to me and baby Dumplings named it. So I'm like, yeah, what's up, Camel? He goes, and he's got that now the handkerchief suddenly had it more like a larger size. I don't know. And I see him like 2 weeks and he's by the OTB, the off-track betting, but not the one at the Garden. It was on 7th Avenue.
Yeah.
And as it turned out, when I go, no, he was a degenerate horse player.
Really?
Yeah. And so I'm walking down 7th Avenue and I hear someone go, hey, some here. I don't think he knew my name yet. And I'm like, what the fuck is that? And I turn around and here's this guy with this large handkerchief. I go, it's the fucking Camel, right?
And had he disappeared at this point? He's kind of MIA. Okay.
And once again, if I saw him, it would only be at these monthly wrestlings at the Garden only.
Okay.
So the Camel. So I go up to. I go, what's up, man? And he goes, can you help me? I'm like, help you do what? He goes, I fucked up.
Uh-oh.
I'm like, what do you mean you fucked up? Well, what's like, this guy's nuts, right? He goes, I think you remember my name. He goes, are you Cary? I go, yeah, I'm Cary. I go, what's up, Camel? He goes, oh, I lost a lot of money playing the horses and I borrowed money from my wife. She's going to fucking kill me if I don't get the money back. I'm like, well, what do you need? I said, I'm not going to help you with your wife.
Right.
So he goes, well, I've got a good deal. I'm like, well, what is it? He goes, they're having, and he was a fan too. That's why he specialized in the wrestling.
Yeah.
He said, they're having the WrestleMania 2. Now, as for the people who don't know, tell us about how WrestleMania 2 was done.
Sure. WrestleMania 1 was only from the Garden, and then WrestleMania 2 was from the Rosemont Horizon in Chicago, and I think the LA Sports Arena or the LA Forum in Los Angeles, and then on Long Island.
Correct.
Yeah.
And the rest of the now, boys and girls, you had to go to a closed circuit viewing of this, whether you lived in Reading, Pennsylvania or Biloxi, Mississippi. And in New York City, they were having it at the Garden.
Really?
The Garden.
Okay.
On the big screen.
Yeah.
You know what? It might have been, you're right. The Garden was in repair and it was I think it was in the Felt Forum. And they were also having it at the Beacon Theater.
Okay.
And they were probably having it at the such and such theater in Jersey City.
And I recently read WrestleMania 1 did over 1 million unique closed circuit tickets for WrestleMania 1.
Okay.
And some limited pay-per-view. So this was a big deal going to a place to see WrestleMania, closed circuit.
Right. And if you went to Nassau, you got to see, or if you went to Chicago, or if you went to LA, you got to see an hour of live wrestling, which on paper sounds pretty good.
Yeah.
And then the rest of it you see on the big jumbo screen.
Right.
So the Camel says to me, oh, I've got tickets for the WrestleMania. Now, I knew my instinct at that time, and I was hardly an expert. My instinct was Nassau Coliseum. I'm not interested.
It's a schlep.
It's schlep.
You got to take the long.
I know there's certain Long Island guys. There were Long Island guys that worked there, and if you went out there, I went to some Islander games. I remember going to a Black Sabbath there, and they weren't as intimidating as some of the Garden guys, but they didn't like it. It's like this is our area.
Yeah.
But they were like 20-somethings. They weren't the worst guys, but it was still their area. So the Camel had an ass. He goes, I also bought for the Beacon Theater and Madison Square Garden. I need help. So I said to him, what about Boof?
Yeah, wasn't that his trusty assistant?
He says, now he takes the handkerchief away for a moment and he spits. He goes, Boof can't sell shit.
Oh no! You got to call in the reinforcements.
He's only good to send to the window. Fuck Boof. So,
wow! Turn his back on Boof just like that.
So he goes,
wow.
I want you to help me. And there was another guy who he had fostered a relationship, who was a regular ticket guy. And I think he's still around. He was a former New York City school teacher. This guy, Cody. He was a good guy and he wasn't a druggie. He always walked with a limp. He had a cane. He was well-spoken. He was a black guy, and I was friends with him. So it boiled down to the only two people that the Camel was going to trust was me and Cody. So he says, we made these plans. I go, well, it's 2 weeks away. He goes, well, I've got to figure something out. Whatever. A few days before the events, we met with the Camel. Now, I met with Cody ahead of time, and I told him the deal. And Cody's like, well, we don't want to go to Nassau Coliseum. Let's get the Beacon tickets and get the New York, the Garden tickets. Yeah. And, that'll probably be decent. Now, the protocol was that if you got tickets, either like from a ticket broker like myself that go to the street, the ticket broker is not, if he gets face value back, he's thrilled. And unless he hears, ooh, Pink Floyd was at Giant Stadium and you could hand them out for $75 a piece, $20 seats in 1987, which happened. Same with Bruce. I was at Bruce shows where it was $100 a ticket and people were paying.
Wow.
Right. And then the broker would be like, look, I'm giving you the tickets all the time. You can't give me back 40 each. You were getting $100 a ticket.
Yeah.
But the Camel had no point of reference. He was thinking, we boiled it down that, and Cody and I said, look, we'll tell the Camel that we're only going to work the city and let him go. And one other detail that I left out, the Camels, and I guess this detail came when we met the Camel after my conversation with Cody. The Camel's wife came to the meeting because she was so worried about the money.
Oh my goodness.
So the Camel meets us. We meet him at McDonald's on 34th Street and 7th Avenue.
I don't believe that's there anymore.
Probably not.
Yeah.
And although one time when I was with the Bernie, but this comes into play also. When I was with the famous Bernie, there were 5 Bernie brothers.
Okay.
There was Bernie, James, Norman. What the hell was it? There was Dee Dee. And I'll think of the 5th Bernie brother. But on a cold winter night one time, I ran into Dee Dee, he was a nice guy and he was generous. And he was like, hey, you want to smoke some crack? I'm like, sure.
Oh my goodness.
He wasn't asking for no money. He just wanted company. Where did he want to go that he considered a safe place to smoke crack cocaine where no one's going to bother you? The second level of the McDonald's.
Oh my goodness.
He goes, hey, cool here, Cary, don't worry.
Oh
anyway,
my goodness.
That's to say, well, that was later on.
Wow.
So we'll have to circle back.
I'm really glad times have changed. I mean, we're talking about a guy named the Camel and smoking crack in the McDonald's. They didn't do that. I lived on Lafayette and Canal. They didn't do that on the one on Canal Street, the second level that I knew of. I should take that back.
You never know.
Yeah, you never know.
So we meet the Camel and, the wife is in tow, and I'm looking at Cody, and Cody was well-spoken. He was cool. He was a former New York school. He was a former teacher, and the Camel's like, look, I'll give you guys these tickets. I've got, I think he had like 40 for the Beacon and 40 for the Felt Forum or the Garden, and they were $20 tickets. And he's like, look, you guys, this is 2 days before. You don't know how it's going to go. Yeah. Are there going to be, it was sold out, but are there going to be buyers? Are there not going to be buyers? And he's like already saying, you'll give me back double the price, right?
Oh my goodness. Well, why did he have all of them if he thinks he can get double the price?
I said, listen, we got to steal. I think I got upset and Cody's kicking me under the table. He goes, listen, Camel, we got to see how it goes.
Yeah.
And the wife says to him, the wife says to the Camel, shut up, you idiot. These two men are trying to help you. So he's like, man, maybe you'll give me back 30 a piece. I go, look, we got to just see how it goes.
Yeah, you got to see what the market is.
So come the day of the event, the Camel is on his way to Nassau, and with the wife, and maybe he got both.
Yeah, quite an entourage
to help him.
Yeah.
So Cody went to the Beacon. I was at the Garden, and it turned out that you could sell the tickets with no problem for like between $40 and $50. Wow. There was tons of buyers.
Really?
So the plan for me and Cody was he's going to be at the Beacon. I'm going to be at the Garden, and I wanted to go see the wrestling.
Yeah.
So we planned to meet I think it was a matinee.
It was. The Long Island went first.
Right.
And it was on in the afternoon so they could fit LA in.
Right.
Yeah.
So we were going to meet each other at like 7:00 and discuss how we did, and we'll figure out what we're going to give the Camel back. And then we're going to meet the Camel at like 8:30. So I did really good at the Garden, and I'm figuring if the Garden was good, the Beacon was probably good. And I meet Cody, and he was honest. We're going to be honest with each other at least.
Sure.
And I said, he goes, how was it? I go, it was good, man. It was like getting like 4. He goes, yeah, same at the Beacon, man. It was like, almost like a $50 handout. He goes, what do you want to give the Camel back? Mm-hmm. Now, probably the proper thing to do. And Cody, I think, volunteered. He goes, I said, I don't know, Cody. He's lucky because, these other guys would have really fleeced him.
Yeah.
He says, why don't we give him back $25 a ticket? And I'm like, well, yeah. And I didn't even have to make an adjustment of the price. Cody thought about it as he announced the 25, which means the Camel was making $5 a ticket.
Sure.
Now, we hadn't seen him yet, once again, to see how he did it now.
And that's an extra $400 based on what you said earlier.
And just as fast as Cody wanted to give him a $5 profit, because he gave us the opportunity to make money.
Sure.
Cody said, as nice as he was, and as fair as he was, and as civil as he was still a street guy. And he said, no, we should just give him back face value. And I'm like, yeah, because Cody, look, all these other guys, they would have told him the cops took our tickets, that this happened, we can only do that. Most of them, or they'd have given him back $10 a ticket, you take it, go to get out of here, Camel, right? So face value was, and Cody's shaking his head, and he's like, yeah. And then we sort of were in agreement. And Cody goes, you know what? You're right. These other guys would have fucking robbed them. Let's just give them back like $7. They used to cut things into like $2.50 increments sometimes. Like, give them back 1750s.
What? Yeah. It went from a profit to underwater.
So I said, well, why bother with the math? Give them 15 a ticket.
Which I gotta say, for those listening, you're one of the most generous people I've ever met. This seems out of character. I
was doing a lot of cocaine back then. I didn't know where the next dollar was coming from. And no one did. And it's the street. So we agree on 15 a ticket. He's getting back most of his money. And he didn't have to bother. He didn't have to be at these places.
Well, he booked himself in 3 places at once trying to unload 120 tickets.
Right. Like he said, he messed up. Anyway, we go to meet him once again at the McDonald's. Fortunately, Dee Dee wasn't there smoking crack.
Yeah.
And I see we're up on that second, because it was quieter up there. We're up on the second floor, and they had windows. So it was like you could see down on 7th Avenue and 34th Street. Mm-hmm. And we see the Camel crossing 34th, and the wife and the camels with now it was March, right? And it wasn't warm yet. And it looked like he advanced to like more of like a terry cloth style handkerchief.
And this seems like a Monty Python gag where every time you see him, something gets larger. It's so.
And the camel's head is hanging low. And I'm saying, oh, God. And oh, yeah, an important detail. In between, I ran into one of the Long Island scalpers who was coming into the city for something. And I think it might have been Tommy the Indian, but I ran into him and I said, "Were you at the WrestleMania thing?" He goes, "Yeah." He goes, "Jesus Christ." He goes, "You couldn't give the fucking tickets away."
Oh, no.
And he didn't even own any. He was like working.
Yeah.
Well, for whatever reason, people, I'm not saying nobody went there, but there were more tickets than buyers.
Yeah.
And the Camel's not a good seller. So these other guys are going to run roughshod on him. Yeah. So the Camel, and the tickets were more than 20 because it was a live event. I think even if he had the cheapest, they might have been 30, 35.
Oh my goodness.
And I think he goes, "Oh, I've got gold." I go, "What kind of gold you got?" He goes, "I have some ring sides also."
Oh,
they might have been like 100 at the time, maybe 75. So it was a total disaster. I don't know. I think he might have had 40 tickets for there also. He probably lost 70, 80% of the money. So he thought, with his head hung low.
He thought he was even in for a bigger rude awakening.
Well, he thought maybe he's going to make some money from us to prepare. Don't forget, he borrowed the money from his wife for the horse deaths.
Oh, God. Cary.
So he comes into the McDonald's and he comes schlumping up the stairs. And I swear to God, I swear on my little cat, I swear on your children, as he reached the top flight of the stairs, and you could hear the wife. It's like a movie, it's like remember Peanuts.
Oh yeah.
Right. I hear the wife talking, and the Camel with his head hung low, he just dropped the towel / handkerchief and spit it on the floor of the McDonald's.
Oh, it's so gross. Oh, God.
And there was a family.
No.
It was a family eating.
Yeah, it's dinner time.
A nice lady and her couple of kids. They were just like, ugh.
Oh, no.
Anyway, he slumps over to us and he goes, "Oh, I hear the garden was good." I go, "It was okay. We got rid of him." He goes, "Oh, God, I hear the Beacon Theater. It was big ticket." Cody says, "Look, I sold him, man." He goes, the cops were out there. You had to be careful." He goes, "Oh," and so I said, "Look, Camel, we're giving you're getting, all of them got sold. We're lucky we didn't get a few taken by the cops. There were other seats out there. We're giving you back 15 a ticket. It's times 80. And he goes, "Oh," and so the wife says, the second time I heard her say it, "Take the money, you idiot."
Yeah, it's $1,200. Yes.
And we gave him the money and he moaned. And she said, "Oh, thank you for helping my stupid husband." and off we went. And there's more to the Camel. But we'll talk about it another time.
I think the people want to know about his illustrious return. But
return was something. But this put him out of action for a while.
Yeah. It required the comeback. This is already one of our longer.
Yeah.
Well, we're about 30 minutes in, but that was worth it. I mean, that's the kind of stories that you'll hear. Last Stop Penn Station.
Hold it. Last thing. The theme song. It's very bizarre and it's very odd. I remember when I told this to Dutch. You got to have a certain kind of humor to like some of you. The 8 people are going to listen to this. Or maybe 80, maybe 800. Who knows? We don't care. We enjoy doing this. The people that are going to listen to this, some of you are going to go like, "That's funny." Some of you are going to chuckle. Some of you are going to laugh. But you have to have a certain style of humor. Dutch laughed. So I'd say, I remember telling Dutch the story, and I'm like, yeah, and Dutch like, well, what the hell is this damn theme song already? I go, well, maybe Dumplings made it up. It was probably during one of his drunken binges and mixed in with some cocaine. And he just, out of nowhere, just came up with this thing. Said, hail the camel, hail the camel. There's only one more line. He eats breakfast, the camel. That's it.
That's that's the important
to this
detail.
Day, and I once in a blue moon, like I saw Cody. I think I went to Elton John like a year ago, and Cody was on the street. We always go, hail the camel. Right?
Wow.
Right. So
is that why you say I hail you?
Right,
That's part of it.
Yeah, you know, we
all
hail
tied
you.
together?
Yeah. But hail the camel.
Oh my goodness. Well, the 1980s were an entirely different place and a different time. And did you have a nickname? I mean, there's all these.
I often got asked that question.
Yeah.
Freddie the Weeper was like my sponsor.
You were his protege?
Yeah, okay. Like, sort of like, we just, hey, AJ, what do they call that with, he was like my rabbi. That's what the mob guys would say. He approves you. Okay. So since I was approved by Freddie, who'd been a long lifetime guy. But no, I didn't, somehow I avoided it. So one guy called me, because it was Freddie the Weeper. He called me, Weeper's Keeper.
Okay.
But that didn't really
stick.
It didn't,
yeah.
But yeah, that was it. I was just Cary. So that was that.
Wow. Well, the more you know about the camel, yeah, I don't think you could call anybody the camel anymore in 2019.
We're going to get to Japan.
Yeah.
But, this is why you need to talk to people. This is why, and I've had this conversation, not just with you,
right,
with guys like Todd Sinclair, with guys like Bobby Cruz, and I'm talking current day here, Joe Koff or Delirious Hunter and this one and that one. That's a little bit more mature. That they understand this.
Yeah, there's some context.
That you gotta, to how are we going to develop, people that are characters, right, unless you interact for good, bad, or indifferent.
Right.
And that's an important thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's one of my favorite parts about traveling, especially with Colt Cabana, who he's just an awesome guy, but I don't think I've ever seen him wear a shirt that, he just wears free t-shirts. And like, that's kind of his personality. He travels very light, has a little backpack, always has his merch though.
And he's always in the right position.
That's the mental game. I mean, he's smartest guy. If you want to learn anything about pro wrestling, Colt's the place to start.
And Colt's the guy that does not stare at his phone 24 hours a day.
No.
Matter of fact, Colt Cabana is one of the reasons, he's like the pod father.
Yeah.
At least of pro wrestling.
Absolutely.
I mean, was there a lot of podcast? I'm
not particularly. I mean, I remember right around the same time, the Honky Tonk Man, who was
really?
Yeah. Honky Tonk Man had a podcast right around the same time. I think Colt beat him to the market by a little bit, but Colt was certainly the first big one, the first one to really catch fire.
Well, he was a visionary.
Absolutely.
And by him doing the podcast the way he did them, it brought out people's personalities.
Yeah.
And we hail him.
Absolutely. We hail you, Colt. And we hail Cary and Ring of Honor going to Japan. And in 2007, Ring of Honor went to Japan for the first time and part of a double bill. There was Noah, Ring of Honor Noah show live in Osaka. And then there was Ring of Honor.
Noah was in Tokyo.
Oh, that's right. And that was night 2. My apologies.
That's all right.
Yeah. Night 1, live in Tokyo. Number 2, live in Osaka, which has some interesting Dragon Gate ties as well. But we're going to take it back all the way to the beginning. There's always been a kind of a fascination, a connection with a lot of the wrestlers that we saw in early Ring of Honor to the Japanese style. And you can see it, guys like Low Ki with the American Dragon, Bryan Danielson, Christopher Daniels. They would bring holds, they'd bring moves that they've seen on tapes at the time. Chris Hero's another guy that, in that next era, that next wave, 04, 05, 06, that started to bring some of that style in as well. And there's always this fascination with Japanese wrestling. It wouldn't be soon before long that some of the biggest stars in wrestling from Japan would come to Ring of Honor. Final Battle 2003. Kojima was there, big star. And the Great Muta was in the main event, defending the All Japan tag team titles.
That was at the Armory in Philly.
I believe
and
so.
I had just sort of, I've been, silent partner at that time. And I remember that happening. We don't do our research properly, folks, but that's all right. That's why this is good, because it's off the cuff. They must have been there for something else also. I don't think they just came for Ring of Honor. I can't imagine
from a financial sense. And
right.
you mentioned this the first podcast we did. From a financial sense, Ring of Honor really struggled to turn a profit, and in some ways was just
never turned a profit.
Was this? Well, I didn't want to diminish. I didn't want to do the opposite of hailing you. But it wouldn't make sense financially for them to be there only for that. I'd imagine it would make sense for them, but maybe not for Ring of Honor to.
There must have been some kind of other convention going on.
Yeah.
I believe Gabe and whoever else might have been in charge then contracted these guys. But that was our first taste of Japanese talent.
Yeah, that was a big wave. And then it was a little bit later. Of course, there was Joe versus Kobashi, the big dream match, 2005, October the 1st. So it was about a year, a little over a year.
Didn't we have Liger?
Well, that's right. Jushin Liger, Weekend of Thunder. That was Boston and the Rexplex, right?
Yeah.
And Edison.
I'll tell you, this is being done from an owner's perspective. So if you're expecting to listen to this and me give you great detail about these matches, or, who they wrestled, I remember it from just like looking at the whole thing and at how it went. And Liger drew people.
Right.
It was good. It was good. It wasn't astounding. Like we thought maybe, we're going to get, 1,500, 2,000 people. I think we got about maybe 800 or 1,000 people, which is pretty damn good. And I have no memory of what the financial deal was, but if we maybe broke even somehow, and Liger was a free agent.
Well, he's over the course of his career, he's been with New Japan primarily, but he's done freelance. You'll see him, of course, with Ring of Honor, but he's wrestled in other organizations in the U.S. So he tends to have that freedom. Of course, he wrestled in NXT the same night we were in Brooklyn,
right?
A couple of years ago, 2015. So he tends to have that respect and that freedom. So,
well, I do remember this. It was really cool having him.
Yeah.
And I'm far from an expert on Japanese wrestling, and I remember in the 80s, in the VHS era, post 80s, but getting to see some of these. You're gonna have to help me out here. Some of these earliest matches that people were all going hog wild over, like Dynamite Kid.
Oh, Dynamite Kid, Tiger Mask.
Yes, yes. And they'd bring Tiger Mask to the Garden.
They would, and then they had those matches there in the Cobra.
Right,
was another great wrestler. Yeah.
So and I certainly was aware of Liger. And he was a really nice man.
Oh, very nice.
That's what I remember. We've had him since then.
Absolutely. And you talk about dream matches for wrestlers, dream matches for commentators. I got to call a couple Liger matches, which was pretty exceptional.
We had him in April.
We did, yeah. And Liger's a guy that stands out. He was really doing a lot of things American fans hadn't seen yet, whether high flying, whether it was just the movement, the pageantry, and you talk about characters. He's a guy that
just
didn't
the way
even
he
need to
looked.
talk. Yeah,
right.
Didn't need to talk.
He doesn't have to talk. And I remember being at the hotel in Boston, and he always had the mask on, except he went to breakfast. He wasn't like the Destroyer.
Dick Beyer.
Right. Yes. But yeah, so we had Liger in 2004, and then we got contacted by Pro Wrestling Noah through the office.
Okay.
And Gabe came to, it was very exciting.
Mm-hmm.
And this is like early 2005.
That would make sense. Yeah.
And talk about schlepping. They came over from Tokyo.
Really?
And this is one of the former bosses, Rue.
Okay.
And who's no longer with us. And Ken Hariyama, am I pronouncing his last name right? Ken, the translator, who's a great guy. And they came over. There might have been a third management guy. I don't remember, but I know it was Ken and Rue. And they came to Edison. And, well, we were just for a meeting.
Wow.
And so it's me, Gabe, Sid, and the Noah guys. So we go out to down the street. Where do we go? Well, the nicest place we could take them to, there was like, a half decent Chinese restaurant. Right?
Oh my goodness. Okay.
What are we going to do? Right.
Yeah.
So
Edison,
we sat there, and I remember like either it might've been before the meeting. Maybe it was after, Gabe, and he was right. It was like, you believe this? These guys are coming over to talk to us.
And they were hot then too. I mean,
Right.
Kobashi was just part of the group that broke off from All Japan. And Noah all of a sudden was becoming a very big deal very quickly in Japan.
And it was flattering, and this came out of left field. So to the best of my recollection, we struck up a relationship, and if I'm telling the story wrong, and we got the Kobashi match before we actually met with them, I doubt it. But we then went on to the famous Joe Kobashi match, which is really a podcast unto itself, because we didn't have we had a building. I think there's some posters in the warehouse still. When we had the Prince Nana, no. The guy from the Rexplex in Elizabeth became extinct. They lost their lease. It was a great building. And the guy that ran the Rexplex, this building manager, he got hooked up with the 168th or 178th Street Armory in Washington Heights.
Wow.
It was in a good neighborhood, though, right over the George Washington Bridge. Yeah. And Sid and I went up to this armory, and it was a huge armory where you could have like a track meet.
Really?
And you could have like 20 tennis games going on.
Wow.
You could have anything. And the building was being refurbished, and we had looked into some New York City places, but the prices were crazy. Yeah. And this was in our ballpark, and that's where the show was originally booked for.
Wow,
with Kobashi. And we lost the building like 2 weeks before he lost the building. Something happened with the permits from the city. It's a whole long story. And thanks to Prince Nana, we came up with the hotel that is in the Manhattan Center. There was not the Manhattan Center, not the Hammerstein, but what the hell was the name of the hotel at that point? This is a Sun Young Moon, owned the hotel.
Oh wow, I didn't know that.
And there was a small ballroom in that hotel, and we were able to get that for the Kobashi. But we'll talk more about that another time.
Well, I think we'll have to. It's one of the greatest matches of all time.
It is.
Yeah, of any organization.
One of my favorite matches ever.
So that happens on October the 1st, 2005. From there, things start to heat up a little bit. We talked about Noah, but there's another organization still around today, Dragon Gate. And we head to 2006. Ring of Honor starts to continue its tradition of going to where WrestleMania is. And 2004, you did so when WWE came to Madison Square Garden. 2005, there was a layoff. WrestleMania,
which I've forgotten about.
Yeah.
Why did I forget? Because it was in, as you informed me, it was in LA.
It's in Los Angeles. That's right, the Staples Center. And then in 2006, WrestleMania heads to Detroit, and Ring of Honor follows, doing 2 in Detroit and 1 in Chicago. Reverse that?
It was in Chicago.
Oh, that's right, because CM Punk was in the entourage as one of the gangsters in John Cena's entrance. You're right.
Yeah. So we had 2 nights in Chicago. Now, that's the first time. Well, it's not the first time Dragon Gate made an appearance, because I believe we had Shingo?
Well,
Or Shima?
There was Shima, yes. And before that, and this is where things start to get really interesting. Kenta, of course, who's now in Bullet Club, was at Final Battle 2005. Marufuji would also start to come through Ring of Honor. And so Ring of Honor's style that's been influenced by Japanese wrestling suddenly is getting these big-time Japanese stars from Noah and then Dragon Gate as well.
The Noah became a regular attraction with Kenta, Marufuji, and Morishima.
That's right.
Who, don't forget, had the ROH title.
Absolutely.
And then Gabe loved the Dragon Gate guys, which there was nothing wrong with loving them because they were great.
Absolutely.
And he brought the Dragon Gate guys in to Detroit and Chicago. I mean, they were known for their 6-man tag team matches at the time.
Right.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but I know the correction I want from you is, was there any Noah talent on those shows? Because Noah and Dragon Gate really didn't, they coexisted, but they weren't on the best terms.
Yeah. I'm looking through the results here. Shima, Doi, Yoshino were all on Detroit. And to my best of my recollection, those are all Dragon Gate stars. Night 2 in Chicago Ridge, you had Dragon Kid, Horiguchi, Saito. Again, those are all Dragon Gate, and they face Blood Generation. That's considered one of the greatest matches.
Yeah.
If it's apples and oranges, but if you don't like Kobashi and Samoa Joe, then Do Fixer Blood Generation, the 6-man tag is the match for you, because that was insane. And those guys are all Dragon Gate to the best of my recollection. And then again, night 3, same talent. So it looks like even though there's this partnership brewing with Noah, Dragon Gate's all over these shows that got major attention.
Well, I know this, that even if Noah might have been soured that we were featuring Dragon Gate, and I don't think they were. I think they had other things going on.
Sure.
And they were cordial with us. And I don't think they really wanted to, if possible, to be mixed in. So you want to use, it was like, go ahead, let them come. But they were the Dragon Gate guys for that WrestleMania weekend. Those were our best houses. For me, under my ownership, those were some of our best houses. We had, I don't know, like 1,200 people in Detroit.
Really?
And then we had close to 2,000 people each night, 1,500, 1,700 legit in Chicago Ridge. And this, by the way, this is the only weekend where we actually had a solid profit.
Really?
Of all time.
No,
it's true. I mean, look at the list, and between the flights, and the amount of guys.
I mean, to be fair, there's a lot of Midwest talent. Colt, obviously, BJ, Jimmy Jacobs. Those might be drives,
right?
But I mean, Christopher Daniels coming in from California, Samoa Joe, all the Japanese stars. Alex Shelley, of course, it's a home game for him, but I got to think Bryan Danielson was flying in.
Right. But the Dragon Gate guys didn't come cheap.
Yeah. And you still made a profit.
We made a few bucks. The merch was, the merch was really good. But I mean, it took that kind of crowd to make some money. But it's okay. It kept us, it was such an exciting period of time.
Yeah.
And these matches were heralded and these cards were heralded.
They're amazing. I mean, I'm looking, some of the main event night 1, Daniels versus Samoa Joe. I mean, essentially it opens with Homicide versus Colt Cabana, Falls Count Anywhere. That was a huge feud. It had everybody talking. Had led to that big no disqualification match. BJ Whitmer versus Jimmy Jacobs. That was a feud that had people captivated. Lacey there. That was the night BJ went for the powerbomb off the top rope and slipped. Right. And so thank God both of them survived that. The next night in Chicago Ridge, Matt Sydal and AJ Styles versus Austin Aries, Jack Evans. I mean, that's a heck of a tag team match. And then, of course, the 6-man, Do Fixer versus Blood Generation. that match is the most insane match. And I don't usually encourage people to pirate things, but it's not currently available on Honor Club. Go out of your way to see it.
It's not on YouTube or anything?
Wink, wink.
Yeah, okay.
Wink, wink.
Yeah, I have to go watch it myself. I remember sitting at ringside for that. And Bobby Cruz also, I think he had worked for Dragon Gate. They brought him over there once, possibly, or maybe it was after that. But he just loved this style at that time.
Really?
Yeah. And they just did some things that you just never saw before.
Right. Incredibly innovative. And I know Shima was a wrestler who came to WCW actually when he was very young. And he got some TV time on WCW against Chris Jericho, which all these years later is kind of fun that they're in AEW together. But it was, for me as a fan, remembering the name and then seeing him all years later kind of grown up.
Those matches you're reading, though, it's amazing the rich wealth of goodness we had. Seriously.
Yeah. And the amazing thing, too, I'm just reading the results for night 3. The ROH CZW feud continues here as well.
Really?
With Samoa Joe, Chris Hero, Necro Butcher, Adam Pearce, Claudio Cesaro, and Jim Cornette and BJ.
That's right. Cornette was there, too. Yeah. It was good. Amazing stuff. So what's the feeling after that? I mean, you've done these great houses with Dragon Gate. And now all of a sudden with Noah, you have Kenta coming in quite a bit. He has a great match against Bryan Danielson for the houses there. Do you remember any particular houses being larger because of the Noah talent? Now that business was okay.
Yeah,
business was okay, and they'll laugh at me or make write in snide comments that Cary doesn't know nothing. But when did Morishima win the ROH tag team, the ROH world title?
I believe it was 2007. Let's take a look here. I confirm too, because they'll laugh at me just as hard as they'll laugh at you. I'm supposed to be Mr. Ring of Honor, but folks, your memory goes over time when you have 2 kids and you're trying to keep up with the Paw Patrol. Morishima won the championship from Homicide, February 16th, 2007.
So that was, we were obviously locked in with Noah.
Right.
And it was a huge decision. That was a Gabe call. And
was there any plan? Because Homicide had just won the title. Was there any plan previous to this? Was this a spur of the moment? I should frame this differently. Was this spur of the moment, or was this?
We'll have to call Gabe and check with him.
Yeah,
but to my memory, it was, there was some planning. But the idea was that, hey, the Ring of Honor title is going to be international.
Yeah.
The title is going to go back to Japan. And that meant a lot. Mm-hmm. And, it was just such a different landscape. And we'll probably be saying this every time we do this. It was just such a different landscape. And so for us to have the prestige of having the Ring of Honor champion now taking the belt to Japan and defending it in Japan, in the story, he can lose the belt in Japan. Our belt is lost in Japan. But this locked us in. These guys, business was very good. The shows were good back then. Business was good. And what this led to was Noah inviting us, as well as Dragon Gate. We worked out to work with both companies and have us come over to Japan, which was something that, we'll have to get back. We're going to talk about this a little bit. We're going to have to get back because we did go to England prior to this.
2004, I believe.
5 maybe. But the idea of going to Tokyo and to Osaka, because we didn't have any ability to sell the tickets.
Right.
We had to trust in the powers that be. We had to trust these 2 companies that they're going to get people in the building. We're not going to post.
Well, you've now you've come full circle. I think there's some realizations being made here, because before we were talking about the Camel and the insecurity that he felt trying to give these tickets to offload. And now you're in the same position. Now you're in the position. Exactly. Now you're knowing how he feels.
I should have said to Rue. And the Dragon Gate bosses, I don't remember their names. The Dragon Gate bosses, the one guy, is a classic, you're
gesticulating like you're smoking a cigarette.
Smoking a cigarette.
Yeah.
And so they, I should have said, guys, can you help me? But they invited us.
That's beautiful.
And they promised us that they're going to draw houses and we're not going to take a beating. And we're going to talk about those shows the next time we do one of these and talk about our experience over there. Because we were really hosted by Noah. Wow. And the Dragon Gate was sort of a side thing. We're taking the bullet train to Osaka for just one day. And it was sort of an in and out. But we had 4 days in Tokyo with the Noah guys and staying at the, what's it called? The George Washington Hotel. It's the Abraham Lincoln. It's one of the two. That's the name of the hotel where, near where, the Differ Ariake is, which is their small arena. And, they were the catalyst to get us over there. And I think they weren't crazy about us doing the other show with Dragon Gate, but it's okay. I don't. They were on civil terms at the time because when we get back to these shows, and I got some really good stories from our 4 days in Tokyo when we were hosted by these guys. There was a cross pollination of talent.
Interesting.
On these,
I noticed that on night 2, and I didn't realize it until you pointed it out. That's there's some interesting names that are put together there that you wouldn't normally see considering the time
I think
period.
It was a special favor. I really do. We could go back and look. Some of you people that really know the history of Noah and Dragon Gate, I don't think that they did cross promotion shows.
No, I mean this blend of folks here, Horiguchi, Dragon Kid, Saito, Yoshina, Doi, Shingo, Shima, Marufuji. I mean, even just Shima and Marufuji on the same team was unique at that time. So
very unique. There's some great stories that go with it, and when next time we get together, you'll find out what they gave us back
for
tickets. For the ticket price.
See, now you really know. This has become more full circle than we could have ever imagined.
Right? And Sid said to me, "Take the money, you
Well, Cary, I got a couple of rapid fire questions before we wrap it up. This will be part 1. We'll head to part 2 next time, of course. Interesting to note, you're a huge music fan, and I'm sure you can answer this question. When did Cheap Trick become the Cheap Trick that we all know and love? After what album?
Live at Budokan.
Right. And did you know, or do you recall that the ROH World title was defended at the Budokan?
I do.
And do you remember who it was? Because I just looked this up. It's quite interesting.
No, I don't.
It was Morishima versus Kenta in March of 2007.
Well, the Budokan is part. We were in attendance at that show.
Really?
Yeah, and we could wrap up with this little story, which we could have saved for this. For the next installment. But there we are at Budokan, right? This is a big arena. They drew maybe, wasn't packed, but it was like maybe 10 out of 15,000.
Wow.
Or if it holds 12,000, there was 9,000.
Yeah. And that speaks to what they were doing at the time.
It was 2/3 full. And Ken, the translator, we're at the show, and my friend Palermo came on the trip.
Really? I didn't know that. I didn't know Palermo. Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
And we're all, two really funny things happened. One of them was Noah thought that had the idea that they can do DVDs at the time, and they wanted to do an English version DVD. And their announcer was the aforementioned Ken, the translator.
Really?
And
okay.
Yeah, some of these exist.
Wow.
And so they wanted myself, as well as Gabe, to be the color person of a few of these matches. Now, you being the voice of Ring of Honor and having an education background, you'd love to hear these. And
well, Gabe has some experience, though. If you don't know, he was known as Chris Lovey on some of the early discs.
But he wanted no part of it.
No.
He wanted no part of it. I wanted no part of it. And, well, some funny things happened on the broadcast. But the other thing that happened, which really was like, for me, I was like, this is crazy. Ken says to me, might have been before the card start. We're in the building, and the building's beautiful, and they had great lighting, and they had good pyro and great entrances. And, you know, we're treated like kings by these guys. They were really nice people. And Ken says to me, Cary-san, they want to introduce you. I think our show, maybe I'm telling this out of order, Gabe, or who's ever listening. This might have been the second year. I don't think so. And if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. But they wanted to introduce me. And I'm like, why do they want to introduce me? We have all these great, Ring of Honor stars. And Ken says, no. The owner of the company is considered very, very important, right? So in order to push tickets for our show, I think their show was on a Sunday, and then we were doing our show on the Monday. We had like 2 days free time, and then their show was the third day, and then our show Monday, and then Tuesday to Osaka, something like that. So I'm like, no, Ken, I don't need to go in the ring. They don't know who these people don't know. They barely know who I am in the United States. You know, they're not going to make us, no. They're very respectful. And he goes, and it's good publicity. And when we introduce you, you know, it's going to be in Japanese. We're going to be announcing that, you know, Ring of Honor is going to be appearing at Differariaki on on this coming Monday night. And there's just few good tickets still available. And that's what we'll be saying. Mm-hmm. And I said, well, what do I do? He says, well, when you hear me say hi, or whoever it was, they're going to like introduce you. And then like, it wasn't arigato, thank you. It just like, you know, it was just an exclamation of that's it. So when I was told this cue, at that point, I'm supposed to just give a little bow and sort of turn to the four sides of the ring, right? So I've tried to get out of doing it. And I was wearing a sport coat and a tie, and I've tried to get out of doing it. And we had plans after the show because they had introduced us not to Roppongi, which all the wrestlers, you've heard the wrestlers talk about.
It's a wild, wild place.
Right.
Yeah.
But that's like Times Square as opposed to the Village.
Oh, really?
Right?
Okay.
So we found out about Kabuki-cho and Shinjuku. Shinjuku was like the gay, funky area, and Kabuki-cho was like the real red light district, which just the Japanese people predominantly went to. In other words, they're just foreigners weren't as welcome. And we'll have some good stories about that. But so we had that on our minds because we've been there a few times, you know. And so anyway, I'm trying to get out of this thing. And like Sid's saying to me, look, Cary, you got to do it. You got to do it. You can't disrespect these people. So I'm not disrespecting. He goes, no, just do it. Don't worry. So I'm like, all right. So anyway, it's between the fourth and the fifth match. And I'm going over this with Ken. I go, Ken, so when you say like there's this exclamation hi, I bow. He goes, yeah, you just bow. And I said, there's no one's going to react. He goes, no, they're going to clap. They're going to they're polite. And then you just leave the ring. So I'm sitting at ringside in match 4. And we can look it up for the next broadcast.
Sure.
And if I got our second trip mixed up, so be it. But this is the story. So, the match 4 ends, and I noticed that there's no, you had to like step up into the ring.
So there's no steps.
Right.
Yeah.
And I'm not, my back wasn't bad then, but still hopping up to the ring, I wasn't crazy. And Ken, I think I said something to Ken, like, Ken, I don't want to trip, He's like, no. So all of a sudden, after match 4 ends, 2 guys come running out of nowhere with beautiful, it was like a golden steps, right? Like the stairway to heaven, right? And these 2 young boys, who were students for Noah, bring these steps down. And I'm looking at Ken, and Ken's like, go ahead. So I walk up the steps, and they start the announcement, which probably was like, ladies and gentlemen, Ring of Honor Wrestling will be appearing they weren't promoting Dragon Gate. They're just putting the Noah part.
Sure.
At Di Ferrariaki on Monday. And right now, please give a warm welcome to Ring of Honor President Cary Silkin. Well, as I got in the ring and the announcement started, much to my shock, there was a nice smattering of applause.
Wow.
Like enough that it was more like one person going.
Yeah.
It was like a nice, and I was
That'd
like,
make you feel good.
ooh, yeah, except it caused me to bow ahead of time. I didn't know what to do, right? So I start bowing and I'm like, oh shit, they didn't get to the high. What am I going to do then? So when I did the bows, and I'm realizing like, oh Christ, I'm going around like a second time. And finally, what am I going to do against the high? So when I got to the high, I did like the, of yesteryear, the hand clasp of the mayor, and, that was it. I got the hell out of there. I half enjoyed it. I was half embarrassed, but the people were so polite there. And we then quickly got in a cab and headed to Kabuki Joe.
And we'll have to save Kabuki Joe and the meeting with the Noah leadership.
Ooh.
And the 2 nights of great action for next time, Cary. And this is a good place to leave off. And, it's got to be the first moment where you really feel like Ring of Honor is starting. I mean, you've had great wrestlers. You've had what they call buzz on the internet. But to be recognized as the owner, you had to have some kind of feeling like
really
this
cool.
is something that's
it was really cool. And Dragon Gate did a nice thing also, which we'll talk about on the next podcast. But yeah, it was really cool. It was unexpected, but what great experiences, treasured moments, past and present.
Absolutely. And hopefully these days kids will be a little nicer to each other. The brokers will be a little nicer to each other. I've got called Rick a Boner most of my life, so I know all about it.
Well, put down your phones for a few minutes, kids. Talk to your friends. You watch pro wrestling. You love these characters. You watch, there's this whole, the whole culture of superheroes. It seems to go hand in hand with a lot of wrestling fans. And they're also, the younger kids are gamers, but it all comes back to personality. Yeah. And, just, put down your phone and talk to somebody and, try to see what's going on.
Absolutely.
Like my dad used to say, open your eyes and see what the scorecard reads.
There you go. These conversations are what I love about your and I relationship, Cary. And you get to join us here next time, Last Stop Penn Station, where we dive in to the events themselves. We'll take you back to Tokyo and Osaka.
And maybe we'll hear more. We'll do the next installment, after that WrestleMania 2, the Camel was nowhere to be seen, but he reappeared a number of years later in 1989 when the Stones were doing the Steel Wheels tour.
Hopefully this means he's back on his feet, Cary.
He came out of mothballs. It's a good story.
Well, that and so much more next time. Last Stop Penn Station. Happy wrestling, everybody.
For listening to Last Stop Penn Station podcast. Rate, review, like, subscribe, and share on your favorite platform. Connect with us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, or at laststoppennstation.com.